This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Drive Thru FM. Today we're going to cover a variety of topics. I opened up a thread on social media and Board Game Geek and basically turned into kind of like an AMA and Ask Me Anything. I was just fishing for topics. And I got so many good questions that I was like, oh, I'll just answer all of these. So I think there's about 5 or 6 good questions that folks kind of asked me about. And so we'll get into some of those, talking about like content creator sort of burnout and sort of how the content creator thing sort of affects, their overall gaming, collecting versus playing games, simple versus complex games, some of the new AI stuff. I'll leave the AI thing for the end because I actually got into sort of protracted discussion with some of my other content creator friends. So I'm going to try to pull all that stuff in at the end. But before we get to that, I'm going to jump in and do 6 reviews. The reviews will be pretty quick. Just kind of the general impressions. I don't think I played more than I played a couple of them more than once, but most of them I've only played one time. So they won't be super in-depth reviews, but I just kind of wanted to touch base on some of the games. I've been kind of light on the review game. There's some more games coming up that I'm excited to review. I'm not going to spoil it here because I don't really exactly know the order. But yeah, there's definitely some reviews coming shortly. But I wanted to kind of circle back and, kind of touch on some of these games that won't be getting the video treatment for reasons which will become clear later. But yeah, so a couple of reviews and then some good topics from some folks. So take a short little break, fix yourself some tea, some coffee, whatever your beverage of choice is. And we'll be back in a second. Okay, so the first game that we're going to talk about is a game that I was very excited to try. It's called Shadowgate. It is a sort of a board game style of an old video game that was from, I think, the 1980s. I have just amazing memories of going to a friend's house a couple of times and doing like a sleepover type of thing. And they had a computer there in their living room. And we played this game called Shadowgate. And it was this like puzzly sort of point and click kind of adventure game, but it was from a first person perspective. I think it's a groundbreaking game. I think it's kind of considered that. And just really cool, fun adventure thing. You could just die at any instant. So if you're familiar with like those old games Myth or Zork, which was a text-based game, Shadowgate was kind of that same thing. And the board game name is actually called Shadowgate The Living Castle. It's from Trick or Treat Studios. And they've done a fair bit of releases here over the last year. They did a remake of the Traumfabrik, the Dream Factory game from Reiner Knizia, which I reviewed a few months ago now. And I enjoyed their remake of that. And I was really excited for Shadowgate. And I was like, gosh, how are they going to do this, point-click adventure game, in a board game form? And it really just did not do any. I mean, it's one of the worst games I've played. It has this really terrible dice rolling mechanism for doing your actions, which just can just hose you up and leave you basically without any resources. And you kind of just bounce around to these different locations doing these different quests and things like that. That it's just pure like jump around and, and roll dice and try to either fight monsters or, collect these different items that have these symbols on them. And that's all they really amount to for like comboing up, some of the requirements on kind of the quote unquote quests and stuff like that. And really, I'm just mentioning this game to sort of steer people away. So if you see this game, you're like, oh, I remember Shadowgate. I'm also in my, late 30s or 40s or whatever. That'll be fun. You just don't even bother. Because I was just severely disappointed by this game. It was like they fully just, I hate to talk like this, but they fully just kind of phoned in a design to claim this IP that I'm sure is just sitting out there that nobody even remembers. I do know that they came out with like a recent video game, and I looked on Steam and it had some good reviews, I think. But I do recommend. I think you can get like a remake of the original, which is like verbatim but updated graphics. You can get that, and that can be a lot of fun. I think the game will probably show its age, but then there's like a new version of the game which is totally new quests and puzzles and things like that. And I believe that the folks that made that new game also implemented some of the design alongside Trick or Treat Studios based on the credits on the box. So Trick or Treat Studios probably isn't fully to blame. I think they kind of picked it up as after like a failed Kickstarter and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean it's just something to avoid, and the only reason I mention it is because I think some people might get stuck in by, oh, that looks cool, I remember that. Don't go for that at all. I don't want to spend more time on it. The next game I'm going to talk about is Classic Art, which is a Reiner Knizia game. It is sort of like, I guess, trying to be a different version of Modern Art or Modern Art the card game. And, part of the thing with Modern Art and Modern Art the card game, it's sort of like a gambling thing. I mean, Modern Art, which also uses cards, it's different than Modern Art, the card game. Very confusing. Modern Art I really enjoy. It's an auction game. You're sort of playing cards out of a hand, so there's cards in it. And then you're trying to sort of try to guess at and sort of evaluate sort of the scarcity of the different artists that are depicted on the cards and then kind of bidding accordingly. It's really simple, but it's a lot of fun. Modern Art the card game is kind of the same thing without the bidding. It's just kind of like playing cards and sets. And it's pretty good. Like, it's okay. Like, it's kind of fun. This one is now this new edition is from Cool Mini or Not, or Come On, or whatever you want to say. And the looks nice. I like it because it uses a lot of like real art, sort of classical art, if you will, and everything looks good in that regard. But the game, I mean, it's just not a game that is worth playing either. It's the same kind of idea where you're kind of betting on the different cards to come out, but it is absolutely like dry and gimmicky and gamey, and it just sucks. I mean, this is one of those games where if people say, Reiner Knizia is a themeless mathematician kind of thing, and I'm like, well, yeah, here's a good example of that. That's kind of where I fall on this game, and I think he's unfairly labeled that in many of his other games. But this one just feels like kind of a leftover bits of the Modern Art and Modern Art card game design, kind of just hanging around. And kind of, just the leftovers of that. And it just really was very disappointing. I mean, similar to Shadowgate, where I was like, oh, this is going to be like a twist on Modern Art. And I've, moderately to, exceedingly enjoyed each of those other two games. And this one just did not deliver at all. It's just so purely mathy and gamey and setting the frequency of the cards is like this whole grid board thing. It just is not fun at all. Okay, so that's kind of the, almost all of just the pure nonsense out of the way. These next few, I think these have some merit. I have some particular issues with them. And so I played those first two only once each, but that was enough I needed. Now this third one here, this is Darwin's Journey. I played this one twice. And I wasn't sure about it the first time I played it. And it has a lot of cool stuff. It's by the same designers that did Marco Polo. I'm just looking here. Yeah, so Barrage, which I really enjoyed. Lorenzo Il Magnifico, which I enjoyed. Newton, which I enjoyed. So much other things. And this feels like a lot of those games, especially kind of like Marco Polo in a way. And what this is, you're sort of following along the journey of Darwin and sort of like retracing his steps in a way. So he's had his, great discoveries in the Galapagos Islands and his sort of theory of evolution and all that kind of stuff. And you're sort of piggybacking off of his research and sort of developing, your own sort of stuff along the side of that. And you go to these different worker placement spaces and you move your little ship along this kind of map, which is kind of cool. And you find these discoveries, you write letters home, and it's this worker placement game. So the thing that bugs me about it, and I'm still kind of unsettled on it, is you have these little seals that are these different colors. And there are places where you go and you collect those. And to activate some of the other worker placement spaces, you need to have those different seals collected, and that will kind of unlock the, more powerful things. And that part to me, I think I do end up coming down a little bit negatively on, because it feels like you have to kind of do that. And I've seen it in one of the games where I played it, where I just was not able to get there before everybody else, and then that kind of just hindered the rest of my game. And then I've seen it in the other game that I played that something happened to somebody else, because the second time I played, I was like, okay, now I know you got to get in here and get these seals. And so that kind of bugs me, and I kind of liken it to a game called Hansa Teutonica, where, and that's a great game, but it has this one spot where you kind of like have to go to it. Sort of depends on the strategy, but early strategies of the game are like, go to the spot to get yourself extra actions, and even if you don't end up getting it, you want to go there to block other people, and then it gets you kicked out. And so it's like the opening game is like, you got to go and get to the spot to get the extra actions. And this is similar, where you've got to go to this spot and get the different seals, and just to do the other thing. So if you get locked out of getting these seals, which is just a very abstract thing, and then you can't do these other cool things. And the thing is if they were somehow pull that out of the game somehow, and you couldn't, the design would unravel to a certain degree. But if they could do that, then the rest of the game is really cool. Like, I like all this other stuff, like, doing the research and going and exploring the islands and all that kind of stuff is just really neat. And I like the theme of it. The components are great. It's just a very interesting game, but that little hook of it bugs me. And the other thing that bugs me is there's some of these special ability tiles that you can shuffle up and deal out, and they will give you like these, beefed up worker placement things. One of them bugs me because it basically is like a copy action, where you can sort of copy the, I can't remember what the term is, but like let's call it the knowledge or the research that somebody else does. So somebody kind of sets themselves up to do this big thing, and then they do it, and then somebody else comes and copies it. Now, it's available for everybody to do. I just don't like that that's in there. Now, you could easily pull that out, and it's not that big a deal, but that was just like, this is weird, because thematically, I've done all this kind of work and putting things together, and now there's a space where you can just like copy it or something. I don't know. That one's not a big deal, but that was just kind of a stickler for me. So Darwin's Journey, I would, some people have that like try, buy, or, ignore or whatever. I would put this in the try area, because I just, that seal thing just bugs me, and it's too gamey, and it really, to me, kind of detracted from a lot of cool stuff that I thought was going on. And then I was like, kept having to focus on that. And I'm like, this is just, oh yeah, that's right, I'm playing a board game. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, I'm getting into this other stuff, and there's just this so, apparently mechanical thing that's getting in the way. And so, that happened. I mean, we're playing games here, right? So that's going to happen, but it just didn't marry up right. So that, sometimes I play a game and it's just like pure mechanic calculation, blah, blah, blah. I'm just, trying to get in there and crunch the numbers. And then other times I'm playing games where it's like, oh, I'm just into the theme and I'm not even worried about the mechanics. The mechanics are like this effortless breeze behind me, sort of like, filling my sails and putting me on this journey. This kind of was starting to do that, but then this thing kept getting in the way. So anyway, it's a little tricky, but you can take or leave that. But I would recommend folks try the game, though, because that may not bother you as much as me. And the other thing, the next game we'll talk about, that was Darwin's Journey. This will be Beer and Bread, and it's a similar kind of thing. This is a 2-player card game coming from Capstone Games, and it's been out for a while. And I like a lot of it. So you have these cards, and you are playing them, and it's, it's kind of like a straight card game, a San Juan style game, but you have these places on this board that you're playing cards. And so what you do is you have these like different types of resources that you can get. So you get like the different ingredients for creating the beer and the bread, and then you have the water spaces to get like generate water, and they have abilities, so you can play the cards for the abilities. So they have this kind of multi-use thing, and then you can kind of like play the cards for later, so you get the cards back for later. And so what ends up happening, and that's all really neat. Like I love a multi-use card game. I love all that stuff. And the game is pretty interesting, like most of the way through. But then at the end, you have this kind of like feels like super lucky, like top decking thing that's kind of out of your control based on like which cards you get to go with the combos and stuff. Like there's not enough like I don't know, and I don't know how this would work in this design, but like ways to dig out and get certain cards, somewhat reliably. It was just kind of I don't know. It's a lighter game though, so I don't think that it needs to be that sort of taxing or involved or complex. But the way that sort of the end game sort of comes out, it feels like you're top decking. And I'm realizing I'm not being very clear here, actually. So when you play some of those cards down for those abilities that you get, you're not sure like how well they're going to interact with the other cards that you get, right? But again, it's a pretty light game, so you might get some more mileage out of it. I just kind of found again that it didn't kind of marry up and sort of come together in the way that I would have wanted it to. Anyway, so that's Beer and Bread. And so two more games here. Next one is going to be Witcher Old World. And this one I did play a few times. I think I played this 3 times, at least 3 times actually. I might have played it 4 times because I played some solo games of it as well as games with other players. And this is another one where like Darwin's Journey, where I kind of struggled with it because I was kind of like, do I like this? And I think at the end of the day, no, I don't like it. Now, it has a lot of cool elements similar to Darwin's Journey. There's a lot of different parts of it that I like. But there's a couple of issues with it. So the game, you wander around with your Witcher and you fight different monsters and you can fight each other and you try to sort of like level up your Witcher. And then based on, the kind of the expansions and stuff that you have, which I did try it with some of the expansions, the end game's a little different. So the main game is like you've leveled up your Witcher and you've gotten like these different achievements through leveling up or fighting and that kind of stuff. Now there's an expansion, I forget the name of it, where you actually add like a big bad monster. I think if you're going to play the game, you should definitely add that to it. That's a must-have because that gives you more of a targeted sort of end game, and it's a little bit more climactic instead of somebody just like well, I leveled up and then I had a fight and then I won. So this has you kind of targeting this monster, and this monster sort of like roaming the countryside, wreaking havoc and stuff. And so that kind of adds some dynamics to the game where you can get little bonuses and things like that, kind of following in its ruins. And it's got this weird card play combat, which I just, at the end of the day, just do not like. It's like they have these like weird icons and colors that you try to play and line up, and it kind of reminds me of sort of like a Lords of Hellas, Lords of Ragnarok style combat. I've not played Lords of Ragnarok, but I played Lords of Hellas, and that combat system I liked in Lords of Hellas. But this one feels like it has no rhyme or reason because you kind of every turn you're automatically buying these cards and adding them to your deck, so it's like a deck building thing. And it just is like, yeah, I take that one, or I'll take this one. It doesn't feel like there's really good sort of combos and stuff that you can try to go for with different things. It's just like, well, this one has a little thing where I can link up this other card, so I'm just going to take the one that has all the link ups that seem to work. And this one does 2 damage but has 3 link ups on it, and this one has 3 damage but has 2 link ups, and it's like, I don't know like which one matters. So that it just feels like there's just that was like whatever was in that deck before early in the design was like ground out of it, and whatever like flavor was just removed. And then the other part of the game that is tricky is a lot of the beginning of the game you don't really have like enough ability to go do a lot of things, so you just kind of have these encounters. And these encounters are like crossroads cards, in like Dead of Winter or something, where so somebody flips a card and reads it, you make a choice, and then you do the thing. So there's a lot of that going on, and it's fine, I would say with 1 or 2 players. But once you have like more players, this is like a lot of reading in the middle of this like sort of efficiency, what's the most efficient route to move my Witcher to these locations to get these upgrades and get these abilities and, fight this combat on this turn so I can kill the tier 1 monster and then move on to kill the tier 2 monster, and then okay, then I can go here and get the upgrade. So you're trying to like puzzle that stuff out, and that part's kind of interesting. But then he was like, oh, stop, everybody stop, we're reading. It's like the marriage of the thing. I'm trying to have this cool adventure, or I'm trying to do this efficiency puzzle. Not both necessarily. And sometimes you can marry those things up. And in this case, I don't think you can. And so that's kind of the main sort of problem with it, is you have that, and that kind of adds a lot of time to it, especially with more players. But you stop doing that, partway through the game. So that kind of story reading kind of goes away, because part of the outcome of those stories is you get cool stuff and, upgrades and other different things, and, cool items. And then, so everybody kind of stops having to do that. Then you start getting into the nitty gritty of everything and starting getting to the end game. It's just like you kind of happen to get into good cards, and then you just like, okay, well, I've leveled up. I can draw extra cards. I can add these extra combos, and I now have some items that will go along with things. And then, we're at the end of the game, and then that's it. And so again, this one just did not really come together in all of its parts for me. Okay, so that was Witcher Old World. We got one more game to talk about. And this one I didn't play this one, but I'll explain why. Because it's more of a piece of commentary. This will be a nice kind of dovetail into the Q&A stuff. So I got this game from Games Workshop called Space Marine, which is based on the popular video game series. The original Space Marine's like a first-person shooter game. It's pretty fun. I never really played it very far, but it was fun. And the new one looks really cool. Space Marine 2 is coming out. That looks great. I'll probably pick that up. But Space Marine, the board game, is loosely based on those video games. And you play like one Space Marine against, like a dozen or so Tyranids. It's a little miniatures thing with a board. And it kind of bugged me because it looks really dumb and simple. But the thing that sort of triggered me on it was, instead of like a little punch out sheet with cardboard tokens, they actually have you cut out the insert. And those are the cardboard tokens. So you're supposed to go and cut this thing out. And then it gives you it's just a handful of tokens. It's not a lot. So it gives you a handful of tokens. And I'm like, that is the cheapest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And Games Workshop is this multi-million-dollar company. And they're actually putting out a game like this, where you got to go cut out the friggin' tokens and use them in the game. And why can't you just stick a little small punch board? Are you cutting costs that much? And I don't want to get in anybody's business, and maybe they have to cut costs because, there's a belt tightening going on. But this is largely a point that I think the board game division of Games Workshop has just fallen off a cliff lately. There's really been nothing that interesting coming out. I mean, they keep churning out Underworlds. Underworlds is it's just its own thing. It's not really a board game though. I mean, it's like a little miniature game with hexagons. And it's like a deck building Magic the Gathering style game. So it's not like they don't have like a Warhammer Quest that's come out. A Cursed City thing was a terrible game. And I don't care about all the production. Who cares about that? The game was awful. Blackstone Fortress was like the last great game, and they have the Blood Bowl, what's it called? Blitz Bowl. That's a good game. But I mean, they just keep coming out with that every year. So what's the point of that? And they keep like reiterating the whole Gore Chosen, thing. I can't remember what's Combat Arena is like the 40K version of it. So they keep regurgitating that and these other crappy little Barnes and Noble games. But whatever happened to where's friggin' another Warhammer Quest that's good, that has somebody. It's like they just yanked the plug on all like any kind of really good chunky board game design, and that's just disappointing. And I got that Space Marine in the mail from them, and I was like, what is this? What are you guys doing? Like, you're just cashing on your own IP for somebody to go buy models cheaply. And that's there's a part of the segment of that side of the hobby where they're like, oh, I got this board game because I can get these models at like a 50% discount because of the board game. You get it in a box and you get it cheaper than if you buy like the normal army boxes. And that is like, that side of the hobby is just full of people that just do that. And it annoys the junk out of me. I'm like, this is whatever. It just annoys me. And I was like, why don't you get some folks to design some games for you? That is good, you know? Like there's good stuff going on in the hobby. Like this is going to tie into the last part of the discussion with the AI. But there's like good things happening here. There's good people making good designs with, you know, good quality and lots of good effort and all that stuff. And then you guys are just like cashing in on this junk. And so that's my review of Space Marine, which is more of like a review of like what's going on with Games Workshop's, you know, board game division these days, because they don't seem to really have one. It's just like an automated machine at this point. Speaking of AI. But anyway, so that's kind of some brief reviews there. And so yeah, let's take another quick little break and we'll get into some of your great questions. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're going to jump into some Q&A questions here, and some of these are multi-part questions, or there's similar threads between some of the questions. So I'll just kind of work through it more conversationally as I go through these. So let's just jump right in, and I will also paraphrase. So one question that somebody had was on the idea of the content creator burnout, and also when and how creators should disclose potential biases when covering games. And these two things actually go together. This is from the same person here. And so I was talking about this with some of my friends. This was a couple of months ago we had this conversation. And the thing that will burn me out more than anything with the content creation is, and this is going to sound clickbaity, but is other content from other people. But let me clarify that. So it's not just even board game space, it's just in general. So when I'm, you know, looking for something to watch or whatever, and I see something that is bad, or just, I think there's something not good, you know, sinister is a terrible word, but it feels sinister. That bums me out that I am like on the same platform as this person, theoretically, right? So I'm on YouTube and I post a little bit on Facebook and Instagram. But when I see something that is like upsets me, basically, it makes me somehow like internalize that and go, man, what am I doing? I'm doing something very similar to this idiot, you know, or whoever. And I'm like in the same space as them. And I'm like, I don't want to even be anywhere near this person. I don't want to even be confused with this person at all. That's what burns me out more than anything. That's what bums me out. Now, on the flip side of that, take that away. That's Tuesday. Wednesday, I'll go watch a played video or listen to a Secret Cabal gaming podcast and be energized and rejuvenated and be like, oh, I'm going to go make a video. I want to do something on my own. Or not just those guys, but like anything. If I watch a cool YouTube video about like, I don't know, breaking down like the cinematography of some movie that I enjoy, you know, or whatever. This is like, and it's a really well made, thoughtful dissection of whatever, then it gets me excited. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's what burns me out. It's like bad content will burn me out and good content will reinvigorate me and re-energize me. And so the dovetail with that is, you know, when and how creators should disclose potential biases when covering games. That's kind of looped into the same question there. And I think that has to do with that quackalope turkey. That, you know, that's something that bumps me out as that guy and then all that stuff that happened with that guy. And if you don't know what happened with that guy, you can just go Google it. And, you know, he basically got caught out in a lot of ways doing something he shouldn't be doing, and in a way he shouldn't be doing it. I also don't think he should be crucified for eternity either. But that stuff, you know, that kind of thing really bums me out. I'm just like, oh, why are you making everybody look bad? You know, first of all, and again, like that's the thing about being associated with people that do those negative things is I don't want to be anywhere close to that. And as far as answering the question, like, you know, when and how creators should disclose potential biases, I mean, you just should do it. I mean, just for yourself. Just, you know, like if it's a sometimes you get friendly with a designer or a publisher or something in this industry just because it's kind of a small space. I don't know. I mean, that kind of thing you can just kind of take. Like, I think I'm pretty friendly with most people that are in the hobby in general. Like, just generally, I don't really have like a negative relationship with anybody that's out there, publisher, designer, content creator. So I mean, and that's just. Should I have to disclose that? I mean, I guess. I mean, I'm disclosing it now. But yeah, I mean, there are certain situations where, if you play tested a game or something, you worked on it or something, like you gotta just disclose that. I don't let that affect me, even if I really like somebody I'm not gonna let that make me enjoy a game, that kind of thing. So, I don't know. I mean, just disclose whatever you feel like you got to disclose. I mean, it's a tricky, you could just run through a bunch of theoretical instances of like, okay, well, in this case, oh yeah, so you're just going to know what you should disclose. There was a good, I'll find a link to it. There was a good, I think it's One Stop Co-op Shop did a podcast on this. And then, Jason, I can't remember his last name, and I'll put all these links in the notes. He did a really good thing with some actual journalists breaking down that kind of thing, and I thought that was a very well dissected and thoughtful presentation about proper journalism and kind of some of the problems that happen in the board game space with that. Because a lot of us, most of the people, are just like hobbyists. That have like a Patreon or whatever and, run crowdfunding campaigns or that kind of thing and do Kickstarter previews, some folks, and that kind of thing. And that's the only source of income that they have. And they don't work for like a big press outlet that floats their boat and then they can write completely, unbiased and stuff. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, the thing is like, this is not a good enough answer. Because I'm thinking of that podcast now that I just mentioned, and the answer I'm going to give you, they would say it's not good enough. But I'm saying, and my advice to other creators is just be honest with yourself about what you like and don't like, and just live with it and go for it. And don't be afraid to not like something either. I mean, the internet has its own little problem with that. With people, if you don't like something, then they get all up in arms or something, and then those same people will go and comment in every social media post about how they don't like this and that thing. But then if you put together a production around it, somehow that makes it more of a target. But everybody's just crapping all over everything, all over the internet anyway. The whole situation is it's a big bummer. I mean, talking about burnout, the whole social media landscape, content creation landscape is just a huge, it can be, if you let it get to you, it can just be a huge burnout thing. Because why am I even in the same place? I mean, here's an example of stuff. This is, and I have a litany of examples, but I enjoy the NBA and basketball, and I I'm from Southern California. I like the Lakers. Don't comment. I don't want to hear about it. And so I like the Lakers page on Facebook, and I have a couple of things, and so I'll comment and type. Not comment, but I'll chat with people, and then the algorithm picks that up, and then it shows me stupid stuff like dad bod sports, which is just complete, this is not really curse word, shit takes, right? It's complete garbage takes and just clickbait and it puts that in my feed, and it's just nonsense sports stuff, and I get a ton of those in my Facebook. That's another piece of burnout. I don't need to hear your stupid opinion. And then everybody with the same 60 comments over and over and over again. They're enlightening somebody. Why am I in the same room as you? That's the burnout kind of thing I'm talking about. It's just annoying. So anyway, that's just an example. And you can go across every kind of industry and everything to deal with that. So the trick there is to block all those pages, which I do. But it's usually the third or fifth time, and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to block this. This is terrible. All right. So the next question is saying, so have some board games by becoming more complex, having a campaign, having multiple scenarios, started to require such a time commitment that there's some similarity to the dedication required for, miniatures games. And I think 100% yes. Much of my gaming time of the last, probably for this entirety of 2023, has been spent playing Oathsworn. And that's with the happiness and pleasure. We always look forward to our Oathsworn game. We usually play it a couple times a month. We had some breaks in there just to vacations over summer, that kind of thing, and work stuff gets in the way here and there. So where else we'd be done by now? But yeah, that's just taken over. In some aspects, the entirety, a large part of kind of the gaming life, right? So yeah, and that's the exact same way as if you were playing something like a Frostgrave or a Warhammer kind of thing, where you have your little miniatures and you get together and you play a single game for about 2-3 hours or so, and or sometimes 4, but depending on the game, right? But it's the same kind of thing, right? So if you have a lot of people, I know some of my friends have the Gloomhaven groups that they're in, or Frosthaven, and it's the same kind of thing. They get together once or twice a month and they play the game. It takes a few hours, and then that's what it is. And that's the same sort of rhythm and pattern of a miniatures game with these style of games. And what the person that asked this, their name is Ian, they said, it is kind of becoming a problem where they kind of want to have multiple games of that style to play. And he's right, it is a problem. And like I said, it has eaten up, certain chunk of my gaming time, where I don't play maybe some of these one-off games as much as I normally do. And I don't know, it kind of depends on if you look at it that as a problem. For example, one thing we've talked about is playing some more League of Dungeoneers at some point, once we kind of get done with Oathsworn. So it's like, okay, well, we're not really going to take a break from Oathsworn to do that. We could, right? But we'll finish that up, and then we'll go play this other campaign game, and that'll eat up a lot of time. And that just seems to be something that's happened for me since COVID. Was a small group of us kind of started to get together after a little bit of time, and it's just a small group of us, and so we said, well, we had kind of like-minded folks at that time, and it was like, oh, let's play through Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress, which we did, and we played through a whole campaign of Altar Quest, and what else we do? There was one Lucky Duck game that was like 4 or 5 games. We played through that, and we played through something, I'm forgetting one, I know I am. Some other campaign that took us like 4 or 5 months, in there, and then now it's on to Oathsworn. So that's been really good though, because it's been something that's been hard to do, and like this questioner asked, it is hard to do. So I think it's something you do have to kind of draw a line and say, like, you know what, I'm going to do this for a while and really commit to this and try out this kind of style of game. And, that may or may not be for you, because I think, people will burn out on a game. Oathsworn, we're in our like 16th or 17th scenario. Like, we're getting pretty close. But 16, 17, there's going to be end up being 20 games of it. A lot of people will burn out on a regular game that doesn't have a campaign way before 20 games. Usually they play a game, 10 or 12 times, maybe, if they really like it, and then maybe they'll move on from it, at least for a while, put it, kind of put it on the shelf, let it sleep for a year or two, and then come back to it. So it's, it can be tricky to get those kind of games played, that's for sure. So the next couple of questions here, there's a few questions from Justin and Andy, and they kind of are similar to some of the stuff we're talking about here, with kind of how the content creation sort of affects things and sort of the gaming lifestyle stuff. I'll start with the one from Andy, because I think it's a little bit singular in its scope, and he seems to kind of wonder if people that are kind of like a newer player, or they don't like to play big complex games, but they still like to play games, but then maybe they're not really that competitive. Do they rate games differently than somebody that likes the big old complex games? And I think 100% they do. I think there's an interesting sort of dynamic there where you kind of have people that want different things out of different games, right? So like I was talking about earlier during some of the reviews, sometimes you have that kind of like high adventure, sort of seat of your pants kind of thematic experience. And then you have that very dry kind of mechanical, spatial, mathematical kind of attitude. And so those kind of two styles are going to definitely view things as, a lot differently. Um, I think the kind of thing that I would, I guess, encourage or something would be to dabble in other things. And I know that like it's trickier to ask somebody that likes some of your, let's just call them more casual type of games, to say, why don't you dabble in some Vital Lacerda games? And they're like, oh no, don't do that to me. I mean, I get that. Um, but I know on the other side of things, somebody that likes a Vital Lacerda, is it tricky to ask them to like enjoy like a good old game of Just One? I mean, I don't know. I mean, everybody's different though, so I don't know. I mean, some people maybe wouldn't really enjoy that. They maybe would enjoy Just One for like 10 minutes, and they would be like, okay, I get this game. And then they would move on and be like, whoa, of course, okay, you get it, but let's sit here and have fun. You got it. You understand it. You've digested it. You've deciphered the mechanics. Why don't you just sit down for a minute and we'll have some fun? You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. It just different personalities and stuff. It's tricky, but I think I mentioned this earlier in the earlier question about like it's okay to not like things. you know, I don't know. An analogy I would give is a movie analogy, and I was talking to some friends about this the other day actually, and I said a lot of times I'll see trailer or something, and they're usually like movies that you would expect to kind of get nominated for an Oscar and that kind of stuff, and I will get turned off by them because I expect that they're going to make me angry. So for example, like Schindler's List, I did not watch that in the theater. I did not watch it for the longest time. I eventually watched it. It's a fantastic movie. I mean, it's not like a fun movie, but it's a great movie. It's well done. It moves you, and it just, it's mind blowing. It takes your breath away in a lot of the worst ways. A movie can take your breath away, but it's well done, and I'm glad it exists. I think everybody should try to watch it. But the sheer horrifying event that's portrayed, I don't want to subject myself to that, right? And so there's a lot of movies that come out, and I'm like, I bet that's good, but I don't want to watch it because it's gonna upset me, and I just don't. Why would I purposefully put myself in the situation to watch that and be angry? Because a lot of these Oscar movies, there's always some point in these movies, a lot of times, where somebody is just absolutely like betrayed or brutalized or something, because the movies often are about how these people will overcome certain difficulties and just imagine anything, and that's great. But it's also like, man, just punch him in the face, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm being a little facetious here, but like it's just tricky. So sometimes I want to have a movie that just is like, okay, let me forget that the world exists and there's lightsabers and dinosaurs. So it's different things for different folks and how you want to spend your free time. So but I'm like I said, I'm not opposed. I eventually did watch Schindler's List, and I watched a lot of other things. The one movie I can think of recently I watched a couple years ago, but it's called Lion. It's about I don't really want to spoil it, but it takes place in India to start the movie. It's about a young Indian kid, and then it kind of goes through his whole life, as he gets older. And it's called Lion, like the animal. Really amazing movie, and just completely like angering at many instances, and moving, and it's funny in certain parts, and all the things. So it's a great movie, but it's like one that I was like, oh man, okay, we're gonna watch this, and it was like it was so good, but it was rough. Okay, so the next kind of comments here from Justin. Justin asked a few different things. do you ever get tired of teaching yourself new games? How do you balance spending time with a game versus other things that you want to do? And I think I talked a little bit about some of this kind of with the whole campaign thing, versus like these games. Do I tire of teaching them? Sometimes, but that goes away. There'll be certain times where I'm like, man, I've just taught a lot of games, recently for some reason, and I want somebody else to teach me, that kind of stuff. I really enjoy teaching the games, and like doing the overviews and the videos and stuff like that. I really do enjoy doing that, especially on the video. And, and it's different when you do it for a game group and getting everybody to play and you're making sure everybody's on the same page. Cause that's like game time, right? I gotta make sure I get all the rules. Don't forget any rule and make sure I say it correctly, cause now we're going to sit down and enjoy a couple hours. Whereas the video, I don't do 100% rules exhaustive overviews. I kind of try to do enough to give you the hooks and all that stuff and try not to get it wrong, but, so it's a little different there, but I enjoy it. I really do. And sometimes you burn out, but then that kind of stuff comes and goes. That's like a cyclical thing, what was the other part of the question there? Oh, how do you balance, gaming versus doing other things? I don't know. You just do, I guess. I don't know if there's like a how to that question. Like you just kind of have to do it. 'Cause if you don't balance things, then you're going to be out of balance, and then quickly, hopefully, we'll realize you're out of balance, and then you just take actions at that point to try to correct it. Like, oh, been having too many game nights or something. Then you just don't do game nights for a while. You know what I mean? Like. And just, I think the important part of that would just be open in communication with, whatever's going on, and just tell your game group, like, I can't make it today because, whatever. I couldn't go to game night. The last Oathsworn night was my fault. I couldn't go because I had work. But, so I can't do anything about that. But, that kind of stuff. You just kind of have to just make your calls and kind of go from there. And so the next one here is a couple people actually asked me about this part, and they mentioned Rodney from Watch It Played, where it's kind of the balance between collecting games versus playing them. And then there, Justin had some bits about how does a content creator affect you. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm kind of like. I'm trying to struggle for. I'm like accidentally collecting games, not accidentally, of course, because it's all on purpose. But it's like my collection just grows without any money leaving, basically, which is nice. Don't get me wrong, that's nice, but there is a balancing act because I do get more games than I would probably buy. 100%. So my shelves and stuff get full way quicker than they would. And I probably inherently spend a little less time with the game than I would than if I'd purchased the game, that kind of thing. Because I also get the games too for the purpose of doing the video or doing the podcast. So it's trickier. So from the collection aspect, the collection grows, and I constantly am like purging. They either go out to folks in my game group or some of my kind of like acquaintances in the area. Or they end up at the, typically I've been going to the Union Gospel Mission. There's some other charities and stuff. They end up there. The Union Gospel folks seem to really appreciate them. Like they get excited. They're like, oh, you got the games. Okay. So that's cool. So it makes me excited to bring them there. So the collection part, I just kind of take care of it because it gets tricky though. I have one friend, let's call him Billy, in my group, who constantly teases me. He's like, I thought you rated that game an 8 and now you're getting rid of it. I'm like, I don't have infinite storage. Like I can't just keep everything. There have been like heart-wrenching like cuts of games that I've gotten rid of that have showed up, like on top 10 lists from previous years and stuff. And it's just like, but the thing is, the good thing is there's like an abundance of good stuff. So all the stuff that I like still have that I'm looking at right now, I'm like, oh, I'm super happy about all the stuff that I have. And you kind of forget all the other stuff that you did like, because you got enough good stuff. So if you got enough good stuff, that's all you really need. And I think, if people are struggling with that, like sort of, retaining, like having too much sentimentality about the games, just like pick half your collection and get rid of it. Just do it. And then, there will be some like pain involved in a way. It's just like, ugh, I don't want to get rid of that, because I like that. It's good. You know, just get rid of it anyway and see what happens. I mean, I do that all the time. And, but what it almost makes me appreciate the stuff that I still have even more, because I'm like, this is the one I committed to, this one, right? I locked in on this one. This is the small group that I have, and these are the ones that are, for the time being, in the collection. So yeah. And then, theoretically, since you've committed to it, the game enjoyment will be even more, because you're like, oh, this is the one that I've kept. I don't like look at. I'm trying to think of a good example here. I don't know. Here's an example. Let's say I don't have the original Kalis anymore, but let's say I had the original Kalis on the shelf and Kalis 1603, and they're sitting right next to each other. And I'm like, I really want to play Kalis. Which one do I choose? Now, Don from Secret Cabal would say, Joel, you choose the original. And I'd say, no, Don, I choose 1603. But if I somehow got rid of 1603 for some reason, and I just had the original, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. That's good. But I chose Kalis 1603, so I don't have the original anymore, and now I don't have any problems, because I just picked that one off the shelf. Easy. That's the only one there. I just picked that one, and I'm happy. It's great. And there's other games like that where there's some similarities that you can kind of tease apart and say, well, I choose this one. Like Tigris and Euphrates and Yellow and Yangtze. I really like both those games, like almost equally. And I don't even care what it says about me that I chose Tigris and Euphrates over Yellow and Yangtze. Who cares? If you somehow stole Tigris and Euphrates from me, snuck into my house, took it, and then you swapped it for Yellow and Yangtze, like if you just took it, I'd be upset. But if you swapped it from Yellow and Yangtze, I'd be like, that's all right. I won't call the police. I don't know what my point with that is, but well, yeah, I was saying, you don't get too precious with anything. And then, the stuff that you do keep, it makes you kind of enjoy it even more, I think. I don't know. That's been my experience. Okay, so I was kind of all over a little bit there. So I got one more question, and I'll talk about the kind of the AI stuff here at the end. So I'll just kind of read this. It's easier. So I'd love your take on the massive shift to nature themes and anthropomorphic characters in most games these days, as not to offend the masses by any theme people take offense to these days. I like some of the games at first, but man, it seems like a lot of them have moved in this design choice and it's getting very samey. Okay. I think I have two answers to that. I don't think it's a massive shift. You've definitely seen a lot of them. Don't get me wrong, but you still can get it. You can still find a ton of games that aren't, nature themed anthropomorphic characters. There's a ton of them out there. And I don't necessarily think it's to not offend. I mean, probably some publishers are doing it for that reason, because it is. I mean, it's an easy thing. Nobody's really going to get pissed off, with some anthropomorphic little beavers that are like, developing the environment to sustain their habitat. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think they're necessarily just not to offend. I mean, I think the point of it is that it's going to appeal to a certain type of person. Because, I mean, I don't know, who doesn't like an anthropomorphic creature? Again, you can overdo it, and I think, there has been a lot. I will grant, let's see, Kenny is the person that asked this question. I will grant him that, yeah, I mean, there's been a lot. I don't know. I think it's fine. I think, we never used to see that, like nature themed, or like with, what was the one? There was a game where you're growing flowers. I think there's another one coming out where you're like, you're trimming a bonsai tree and that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff is kind of neat. It's interesting. Like, oh, you made a game out of that? Okay, cool. And so I think some of these sort of environmentally sort of themed games are kind of cool too. Nature themed, that kind of thing. I don't know. I think it's fine. I don't know that it's necessarily just to. I mean, I don't know. I get what you're saying. You see a lot more of these days. But we had zombie games forever for like 4 or 5 years. So things will shift. There's always these trends, and that's part of the problem though. Because I think some of these original games, like I'm not a huge Wingspan fan, but that was kind of one of the original ones. And I think that was, and from a thematic perspective, the game is really good because you got all of these different birds and there's facts about the birds, and it's very well integrated with the theme. Like I said, not a game I particularly enjoy, but from a thematic perspective, I think it was very honest with what it was trying to do. It was very well intentioned. It was purposeful in the theme it was trying to accomplish, without any of this trying not to offend people. That wasn't the reason the game sort of was birthed out of the designer and the publisher and everybody, the artist involved. But then you get copycats, right? That are like, oh, well, this did well, so I'm going to do this. And this is actually going to dovetail perfectly into this AI discussion. And so the integrity of the people that are copying is probably a little, I don't know, weaker is the right word. Like, they still want to put out a game that people enjoy. So don't get me wrong. They're not this is not a bad person making this decision. But they're doing it from a different place. They're not like, what, I've got this great idea for a game about birds and their habitats and all this stuff. And they're not coming from this sort of, mythical, pure place. They're coming from a very sort of almost cynical marketing point of view, which I don't like. And I think maybe that's some of what Kenny's trying to get out there. Maybe not to put words in Kenny's mouth there, but that, yeah, I appreciate that. And you get that where it's like, you're just following the trend, and you can tell that. I mean, sometimes, but on the other hand, some people might just be inspired by Wingspan and be like, you know what, instead of birds, I'm going to do one about, beavers and building dams and stuff like that. Cause I really have enjoyed that. And I'm got a gaming mind and I'm going to try to apply that to this area or something. So yeah, you kind of have to do a little bit of that discernment yourself and parsing, what you think the intentions are of who's doing the creation of the game. And that can be tricky. I mean, sometimes you can get fooled or whatever, and they didn't really do it with all those almost like sincerity of like the original Wingspan and how that was developed. Okay, so that's all the questions that I had. Again, some people kind of asked the same thing, so I kind of smushed them together. But let's segue in a little bit into this discussion about AI. And so this come up, with the Terraforming Mars is doing a Kickstarter. I believe it's a Kickstarter, yes, campaign for their new expansion, new edition of the game. And one of the questions you have to answer now on Kickstarter projects is, are you using any AI generated art in your Kickstarter project? And in this case, Terraforming Mars said, yep, we are. We're using, I think, Midjourney which is an AI software to generate some of the art, or at the very least, not, they didn't give you like a step-by-step of what they're doing, but at the very least, like some of the ideas for the art to then later be manipulated and changed by a human being into being, the final art for the cards. And they don't really say how much they're going to get manipulated. Like, are they going to run like a Photoshop filter color on it and then leave the art as is, or they're actually going to go in there and do some work? Who knows? So people are upset by this because some of the ideas behind some of the current, what you would call AI, which I'm going to try not to get in this conversation, but it is not AI. It's a very sophisticated Google algorithm with some very interesting outputs, but there's nowhere near the right structure for building artificial intelligence. So that's fine. Let's just call it the AI. Part of how these programs were developed, the data that they were used to kind of train, was using copyrighted artwork, as well as a bunch of free artwork. And so you're kind of standing on the shoulders of existing artists that have not given you permission or any kind of access to your own work to use in the development of, future art. Now, a human being could go and copy and learn from, if I, get Picasso's and study Picasso's and go into an art gallery or an art museum and copy Picasso's, which is something that art schools, I think they still do it. They used to do it. So you would go and copy the masters, and learn how they composed a picture and how they put the colors together and all that stuff. That was a completely legitimate way of learning how to draw, to kind of copy that. And then you would go out, you also go out in the real world and represent things that you saw, and however abstract or whatever you wanted to do. So that's part of the deal. So, okay, is the computer kind of doing that? Yeah, yes, no, whatever. And part of the problem is the computer can do it in like 2 seconds or whatever, and it takes a human being like a lifetime to get to that, point where they can sort of imitate other artists and stuff like that. So I come down on this in a couple of places. One, I think it seems somewhat lazy the way they're doing it. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs, the way the Terraforming Mars thing is working, because you can go generate some pretty, convincing, legitimate art looking types of things with it. And okay, fine. But my point is, and I think I have 2 points, but it's probably more buried under it. One is the first part. When I sit down to play a game or listen to music or watch movies or something like that, I want to have a dialogue with the designer, with the artist, with the writer, with the actor, with the publisher. That's a human-to-human connection, okay? When I sit down and play 51st State Ultimate Edition, right? To me, that's me, in a sense, having a dialogue with Ignacy Trzewiczek, the designer and publisher of that game. And the artists that he's hired, artists, plural, that he's hired, the developers and the testers. Like, part of that experience for me is interacting with that and being happy that I am alive at the time that they were, so that I can experience their thing. So if you think about like Bob Dylan, I love Bob Dylan. So I'm very happy that I'm alive at the same time he is, and I'm able to kind of get like Bob's take on things, right? So, pick any artist you want, Bob Dylan, Ice Cube, Bon Jovi, whatever, right? And you are getting their information. You're getting their sort of take on the universe, on the life, on the world that we live in, on the things that are happening. You get that from them. Like, that's them talking to you through their medium. And games is just another one of these art forms. And that's why I like that. I like that a lot. It makes me feel good. And then I can also, the cool thing with games, probably a little more so than some of the other, art forms, is you're doing it with people there. So again, the people that I'm playing with, I'm happy that I'm alive at the same time as them, and we're experiencing this together. We're experiencing the Reiner Knizia masterpiece that is Tigris and Euphrates. That's all part of the thing. That's part of the attraction of it. That's part of what engages me to it. This mind came up with this. And if you start like plugging in a computer to generate this stuff, it turns me off immediately. Because then what you're telling me is you care more about knocking out product than creating an experience for me. Now, this is mostly personal here. I don't know if this is objectively true. I feel like it is, but again, I'm really biased. So because like Terraforming Mars in them is, using AI to generate the art, theoretically they didn't use it to generate the design. I don't think there's any AI good enough to design a board game of any, like anywhere close to decent. But because they're doing that, they're telling me like, we don't really care, we don't really, we don't really care about the art. We just want that. It's just there as a placeholder. And you know what? That's something that is kind of natural, unfortunately, about this hobby. The art can kind of be secondary. Like I've seen this brought up a couple of times, okay, you have the designer's name on the front of the box. Why isn't the artist's name on the front of the box? I think Ian O'Toole, does he get his name on the front of some of the box? I think so sometimes. Vincent Dutray sometimes gets his name on the front of the box, but a lot of artists don't get their name on the box. I think that would be cool if they did, even if there's multiple artists, put them on the back of the box. If there's like, 8 artists, then put them all on there. And I think that, most of the time they get mentioned in the rule books and stuff, but I think it's important enough that they get treated as more of a first class citizen in the hobby in general. And I think that what this is a little bit of an indicator of with terraforming Mars is like they're of the mind that, oh well, in the art didn't really matter. It's all about the game design and stuff. So we're just going to generate some random AI art. That's the feeling I get from it, and I don't like that. I don't want any part of that. Now, having some discussions with some of my friends, Jamie from the Secret Cabal and Rodney from Watch It Played, we kind of went around 15 rounds on this. I was kind of coming out on different ends of this through the conversation, because they brought up some of these points that I'm bringing to you. They brought up and we've discussed pretty thoroughly. And the other part of it is there could be a point at some point where we have some real AI. It's not like a language model or some kind of image generation thing, but it's like a real type of thing that it's going to pass all the Turing tests. And, there's some argument about, well, if something passes a Turing test easily, then it's too good. So it fails the Turing test because it's obviously a computer because it answered all the questions in 3 seconds, Anyway, but we could get to a point where we have some kind of entity that is creating games or stuff like that, or kind of existing more on a same playing field as we are. Well, and yes, that could happen. And I think kids today and the kids of our kids or whatever are going to have all these tools at their fingertips, and it's just going to be part of their world. And they're going to be like, hey, I opened my little AI app on my digital glasses and created this little holographic play of Shakespeare, but it's also like The Sopranos, and there's dragons and magic. And look at this cool thing I made. And then we're going to go to my house and we're going to watch it after school. Yay. Okay. And then, tomorrow we're going to go to Billy's house and he's going to have made this interesting, like, digital painting thing with music soundscapes. And, they're just going to have tools and fun things to play with. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of imagining that world, and I'm like, you know what, let those kids have fun. These theoretical kids in the future, 20 years from now. I'm like, okay, whatever, But I think you're going to start wanting to, and who knows what the full ramifications of this are. Nobody knew what the ramifications of the internet and social media were going to be. Everybody got that wrong, right? So, but you're going to have a desire to be in spaces and places and in environments and interacting with art that has not been touched by AI. And I think the important thing to notice, and I think that my kind of key takeaway with this is Kickstarter's doing the right thing by asking people if they have AI used in this, creation of this project, tell us, and how did you use it? So all that's doing is giving the backer of that current project the ability to kind of make the judgment call for themselves. Now, for me, no chance. I don't even like terraforming Mars that much, but no chance that I'll want to be involved with it. It just is a turnoff. That's fine. If it doesn't bother you, also fine. But I think the clarity and transparency of that existing needs to be upfront. 100%. That's probably the most important thing. Because again, if I was listening to, I used this example with Jamie Rodney there. There's a David Byrne and Brian Eno album. I'm a little old here, but David Byrne's from the Talking Heads. Brian Eno's from the 70s. Anyway, and they've done a couple of albums together over the years. There's one they did probably about 10 or 15 years ago. It's amazing. I love everything about it. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. And if you had told me an AI made that, I would hate it so bad, because I would be like, oh, this was created with this like artificial endorphin inducing maniacal machine that is trying to trick me to have emotions. It's not David Byrne and Brian Eno writing their life experiences, expressing it to me, and putting down on paper and into the air what they care about. It's some magical corporation that's just trying to like piece together all of like the perfect algorithm of the 7, things that trigger a human being's emotions. I would absolutely loathe that existing. So I should be able to know that I can get into that space and be aware of what's going on. And who am I talking to? Am I talking to some computer generated junk, or am I talking to Billy across the table? And I just want to know. I don't want to be tricked. And this is part of the issue with the AI stuff is, the ability to create fake things, fake audio, fake video, like, misrepresenting politicians or famous people or regular day people. That's a big concern, right? And I think the most important part of this is going to be transparency about what is and what isn't this generated thing. And, if you told me like, hey, I brainstormed some things with ChatGPT before I wrote my novel, I would be like, okay, you kind of just did a glorified Google search. You're like, tell me about the 8 kinds of dragons in literature or something. You know what I mean? And you're like trying to come up with something and like, oh, okay, I could kind of pull these 2 parts about this dragon together. Like, I mean, I've done that. I mean, I've gone on ChatGPT and just farted around on there. To me, it's a glorified Google search. And that's how you have to look at it. Don't tell me this is some AI thing that's thinking and it's aware of the friggin', it doesn't know what a dragon is. All it is spitting to you language back. It's tricking you that it knows what a dragon is. So I think there's, like I said, there just has to be clarity about what people have done and then let you make the decision. Don't try to hide it, because that's when you get sneaky, right? Because that's when you get these fake videos and fake audios and fake art and fake design and fake emotions and fake this and fake that. But if you're aware of that going in, and you're like, I'm just going to play with the little emotional morphine machine today, and then you know what you're going to do. Maybe some days you need that. You need a stupid robot that's not going to have, or it is going to have infinite patience with you, and because you just need like a therapist or something, whatever. That's fine. But then if you want to deal with a human being, you can deal with a human being, and that's it. Okay. So that is pretty much it. Thanks everybody for listening. Hopefully that wasn't too long. Just over an hour here, it looks like. Not too bad. Okay. Thanks everybody. Any comments or anything, feel free to leave them and I'll respond to them. Any questions, follow up, I enjoy that kind of thing. So thanks everybody, and look forward to some new reviews coming soon. Thank you.